I was awoken by the sound of rain pattering against my window. My eyes slowly stretched open, darkness consuming my vision as I stared up at the pitch-black ceiling. A flash brightened my room for a second, revealing every inch hidden behind the blanket of black. I rolled my head around, eyes darting to the window beside my bed. I could only see the sky, dark like my room apart from the occasional flash. It took me a minute to wake up and realize what I was doing. When I did, I quickly tossed my head to the other side of my pillow. I was now facing the wall. Panic slowly started to rise in my chest. My heart thumped loudly, even louder than the thunder. I squinted my eyes shut, my breathing heavy and strained. I had looked out the window. Now you might be wondering why this is such a bad thing. Ever since I was small, I was told by almost everyone not to look out the window at night. Whenever I would ask why, I would receive a dull response. "Something bad will happen," was the usual answer. I wasn't the only person raised with this rule. Every kid in my class was told the same thing, and all of us were equally as confused by it. I figured it was some stupid ploy my town had thought up to keep kids from staying up late. That was until last year when Brody Heathens looked out the window one night. Brody thought the story was nothing but horseshit, and he was determined to prove so. He told the entire school that he would look out his window that night and tell us what happened the next morning. We were all excited, thinking that Brody was as brave as can be, going against our communal rule. I was excited to be at school the morning. I couldn't wait for Brody to arrive and report on what had happened. He was late that day. He came into class looking tired, pale, and sickly. At lunch, we all rushed to ask him what happened. He didn't say anything, only looked down at the pitiful ham sandwich in his hands. No matter how many times we asked, or how loud we asked, he wouldn't answer. A few people were worried, but most brushed this off, thinking that he was playing a joke. I didn't think he was joking. He looked genuinely affected. He was quiet that whole day, which was more than shocking, as Brody had always been a loudmouth who struggled to keep it down during lessons. I don't think he spoke a word that whole day. He didn't come to school the day after, or the day after that, or any day for the entire week. By now, everyone was concerned. On the second week of Brody not coming to school, we were all called into the assembly hall. There, the school confirmed that Brody had committed suicide and that there would be a ceremony for him in the gym during lunch. The school was silent that day. Only the muffled sobs of Brody's mourning friends filled the halls. We all knew that whatever he saw out the window that night must have driven him to do this. People's curiosity refused to let them leave the topic alone. Suzanne Walters was next. She looked out her window one night and hung herself less than a week later. Then it was Jack Richmond. He looked out his window too and had shot himself in the head with his dad's rifle 3 days later. 3 deaths in 1 month. Everyone was terrified, and we all knew that something was causing them to do this. Something was torturing every person that looked out their window at night. I vowed that I would never do it, but now I had. I lay silent in my bed. The sound of rain grows steadily louder. I waited for something to happen, but nothing did. After a few minutes of sweating and laying still as a statue, I rolled my head back out, peering back out to the sky. I started to calm down. It wasn't so scary, dark, but not scary. A confident feeling rose in me. I'm not sure why or how this feeling began, but it was impossible to ignore. I lifted myself up from my mattress, my sheet sticking to my sweat-stained back. I poked my head over the side and looked out the window. There was nothing there. A few dim street lights flicked in the darkness, and a flash of lightning would illuminate the street, revealing nothing but puddles of rain and blacked-out houses resting peacefully beside the sidewalk. Stupid, I chuckled to myself, turning my head to flop back down into my comforter. But something caught my eye just as I moved my head. Something was sitting in the corner of my room. I felt my heart freeze and stop. It was still pitch black in my room, so I couldn't tell what it was, but it looked like a person. They sat on the floor, knees pulled up to their chest, hands clutching their legs, as their head was bowed low, face hidden behind their thighs. I couldn't look away from the figure, convinced if I did, it would jump up and rush me. I couldn't move, terrified that if I did, the figure would notice me. Slowly, the figure began to raise its head, bright orange eyes peering at me through the thick darkness. A cracking sound followed in pursuit. The figure rose to its feet. Once it was fully stood up, it was up to my ceiling. I didn't know what to do at that moment. I slowly inched my head towards my pillow, gently resting it against the fabric. I rolled over, slow as a snail, so I was facing my wall. The whole time, the figure stayed still, just watching me with its beady orange eyes. I shut my eyes as tight as I possibly could. I couldn't stop the waterfall of tears from dripping down my face, although I did my best to be as quiet as possible, apart from the occasionally loud sniffle. I'm not sure how, but eventually, I fell asleep. I woke up the next day. The sun beamed into my room, and the figure was gone. I jumped out of my bed and ran downstairs. My parents were sitting in the dining room, and behind them stood the figure. I could see it fully now. Its skin was a dry, muted gray, and it had two little slits in its face for nostrils. Wispy tufts of hair crept out from its scaly scalp. It had a long, skinny body. I could see its ribs poking out of its stomach. It had short, stubby, almost dinosaur-like arms, with nails as long and as sharp as knives protruding from its fingers. Its orange eyes glared at me, while it smiled, big and commercially white teeth poking out from its gray, chapped lips. "Mom," I muttered, baffled at how my parents couldn't see the figure looming behind them. "Yes, sweetie," she answered in a chipper and unbothered tone. "What's up, bud?" asked my dad. The figure cracked its neck down, so its head was looking down at my father, eyes rolled up to the edges of its eyelids, gazing at me. "You're looking a bit pale," my dad said, worried. I wondered if I should tell them. It was obvious they couldn't see it. I choked down my fear and spoke with a hoarse voice. "I'm fine, just tried," I said. I sat down at the table. The thing looked at me the entire time I ate. I followed me to school, diving behind cars and trees every time I tried to look at it. I sat down in class. The thing was standing at the back of the class, watching me. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. Its eyes felt like they were stabbing me. My friend Dave sat down next to me during lunch. "Dude, are you okay? You've been quiet today," he said. I looked up at him. The creature was standing behind him, waving its knife-like fingers around in a strange pattern. Was this the thing that Brody had seen? The thing that drove him to kill himself? I knew it would try and do the same to me. I wouldn't let it. I looked out my window last night. Dave went pale. "There's a creature following me now. Nobody can see it but me. I think it drives you to take your own life. I'm not sure why, but it won't do that to me." I looked up at the creature. It was now snarling at me. I reached its hand up and clapped it down on Dave's head. I watched Dave freeze, and his eyes slowly rolled to the back of his head, blood pouring from them, along with his ears and mouth. I jumped to my feet, a nauseous pit rising in my stomach. Dave fell to the ground, staining the grass with cherry-red blood. "Dave!" I shouted. "What?" His voice came from behind me. I turned. Dave was standing there, alive, but he was also lying on the floor, dead. I felt dizzy. I couldn't keep my head straight. My head throbbed as I tumbled to the floor and blacked out. When I woke up, I was in a dark room. There was nothing in the room but a bed. The creature was lying on top of me, face inches away from mine. I wanted to scream, but nothing would leave my mouth. Slowly, the creatures bent down, drool spilling onto my face and into my mouth, choking me. He opened his jaw wide, his jagged white teeth ready to rip me to shreds. "Alex!" I opened my eyes. I was lying in a hospital bed, bandages wrapped around my temple, and an IV pumping fluids into my body. My mother was sitting beside me, clutching my wrist. "You're awake. You're finally awake," she cried. What my dad said next made my blood run cold. "Why would you drink that rat poison? What were you trying to do? Kill yourself?" I looked up at the small window on my hospital room door. The creature stood there, grinning as its glowing orange eyes pierced right through me. Story 2. The Enigmatic Neighbor. Life in our quiet suburban neighborhood had always been peaceful and uneventful. That was until the enigmatic neighbor moved in next door. The moment he arrived, our lives took a sinister turn that would leave us scarred for life. It started with his arrival. The new neighbor, Mr. Arthur, moved in on a gloomy evening, his moving truck unmarked and shrouded in mystery. He was a tall, gaunt man with sunken eyes and a permanent half-smile that never reached his eyes. As he unpacked his belongings, I couldn't help but notice the oddity of his possessions. A collection of old, weathered books, antique curios, and strange artifacts that seemed out of place in our modern neighborhood. Despite our initial curiosity, we were cautious. Mr. Arthur kept to himself, rarely venturing outside. He was a recluse, and his presence cast a pall over our once peaceful street. The strange occurrences began soon after his arrival. Lights flickered in his house at odd hours, and eerie whispers echoed through the walls at night. It was as if his home was harboring secrets that refused to stay hidden. One evening, I saw him in his backyard, performing a bizarre ritual under the pale moonlight. He chanted incantations in a language I couldn't understand, and a strange, otherworldly glow enveloped him. Fear gnawed at my insides as I watched in silence. The neighborhood began to change as well. Flowers wilted, trees withered, and a pervasive sense of unease settled over us. It was as if Mr. Arthur's presence was infecting the very essence of our community. I couldn't ignore my growing curiosity and unease any longer. I decided to investigate, convinced that there was more to Mr. Arthur than met the eye. I began by researching his past, unearthing a trail of unsettling incidents and dark rumors that hinted at a troubled history. One night, as I peered through my bedroom window, I saw Mr. Arthur in his backyard conducting a ritual that sent chills down my spine. He was surrounded by a circle of candles, and in the center lay a mysterious, ancient-looking book. As I watched, he raised his hands to the sky, his voice rising in a haunting chant. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of light filled the backyard, illuminating his form in a sinister glow. It was as if he were harnessing some unholy power from the depths of the cosmos. I knew I had to confront him, to discover the truth behind his sinister activities. The next morning, I approached his front door, my heart pounding with fear and determination. I knocked, and the door creaked open on its own, revealing a dimly lit hallway beyond. I cautiously entered his home, my senses overwhelmed by the musty scent of ancient books and the eerie silence that enveloped the house. I followed the sound of chanting, which led me to a hidden chamber deep within the house. There, I saw Mr. Arthur in the midst of a ritual, his eyes fixed on a swirling vortex of darkness that seemed to defy the laws of reality. I confronted him, demanding answers, but he only smiled that sinister half-smile and continued his incantations. Fear gripped me as I realized the truth. Mr. Arthur was harnessing a malevolent force, one that threatened to consume us all. Desperation overtook me as I tried to disrupt the ritual, but the darkness seemed to have a mind of its own, lashing out with a supernatural force. Just when I thought all hope was lost, a brilliant light filled the chamber, and the vortex of darkness dissipated. I stumbled out of the house, shaken and horrified by what I had witnessed. To this day, I can't forget the horrors I encountered with the enigmatic neighbor. The memory of that night haunts me, a chilling reminder that sometimes evil can lurk in the most unexpected places.